All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim, out here pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon all your houses. This is the brother Quanawath. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And this lesson, man, is ultimately going to just be, a World War III update. There's really a lot going on right now, man. Outside of America, and inside of America, man. But I want to deal with this situation, right, that's ultimately brewing between the United States, and Russia, right? For those, that have been on their watch, we know what's going on, between America and Venezuela. But for those that don't know, which at that point you're basically living under a rock, but America basically just took over Venezuela, and we understand that it's for numerous of reasons, and the main reason being to basically just take the resources, right? As we read in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, starting at verse 4 on down, right? Esau, Edom is the wicked, right? And he goes around to these different nations, and he has a track record of doing this, right? He has a history, a long history of doing this, going into these different nations and toppling their governments, and setting up a government which benefits him, so that way, again, he can utilize the resources and whatnot to his benefit while destroying, right, that country that he is taking the resources from, right? Because really those resources are, that money source or financial, source for that country. But yet here Esau he comes in and takes the resources, and destroys that government, so that's ultimately, what had recently just taken place, right? America, Donald Trump openly saying that they're going to be controlling, Venezuela. And then he just recently said that they could be controlling Venezuela or running Venezuela for years, which, right, also, right, to add, Russia and China, right, but mainly Russia, right, or they have or basically Venezuela is an ally, to, Russia as well as China, and this whole ordeal that had taken place. Yes, it does affect China, right, because China ultimately had some boats, that are trying to, either leave or enter, Venezuela, but yet you had the American blockade, and China's not playing, right? China's, saying, hey, you're gonna, get out our way, or, they're ultimately going to, show force, and they're already starting to, move, Navy ships, in the direction, of Venezuela, right? To, basically aid their, their oil tankers. But, one thing that's ultimately taking place is America went to go seize an oil tanker, which, turned around and tried to flee, and at first it didn't have, any markings, but then it turned around and, they ultimately painted, the Russian flag, on the side of the boat, meaning that they're covered by Russia, And as you see in this article I have right here, it says the U.S. seizes Russian flagged oil tanker after weeks long high seas chase. So eventually America caught up, and seized, that oil tanker, which Russia's pissed, right? It says the United States seized a Russian flag, and this is on the Newsbreak app, but you see it says NBC Palm Springs about a day ago. It says the United States seized a Russian flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic on Wednesday, ending a dramatic weeks-long pursuit that began off the coast of Venezuela. U.S. European Command confirmed the vessel has been secured. The Department of Homeland Security is leading the operation with support from the U.S. military. The tanker, which recently changed its name from Bella 1 to Marinera, was first purposed by it's like at first pursued by the Coast Guard off Venezuela last month. It's one of several sanctioned oil tankers operating near the country that have recently switched their flags to Russia, a move that's created friction between Washington and Moscow amid the Trump administration's blockade of Venezuelan oil shipments. Now, whether this oil tanker is truly, a Russian oil tanker, or it was just kind of a move that's being made, it still doesn't take the fact that Russia is responding right to the situation. And I want to read the rest of this. It's just this one long paragraph, and then we'll get to the next article. Right? It says the Kremlin, a strong backer of the Maduro regime, right, which Maduro as Putin, as well as the president of China. His name's kind of hard to pronounce, but they basically ultimately came at the United States and said that they need to release Maduro, because China basically owns the debt of Venezuela, and they were basically doing a debt to a debt oil trade, if you will, right? Venezuela would give oil to China, right, in exchange for lowering some of that debt, which that's how China ultimately is involved. But see, Russia is again a major player in this whole situation, because Venezuela was an asset, a ally and an asset to Russia, right? Especially when it came to that oil, right? It says the Kremlin, a strong backer of the Maduro regime, criticized what it called disproportionate U.S. attention on the vessel. The seizure follows a broad enforcement push. The U.S. captured 2 oil tankers off Venezuela last month as part of its effort to cut off sanctioned oil flows to and from the country. Venezuela's vast oil reserve has become central to the administration's regional strategy. President Trump said Tuesday that Venezuela would hand over 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States, a deal that's emerged as a point of tension with both Russia and China, who have maintained close ties with Caracas, which is the capital of, Venezuela, But I want to jump to this next article. Again, I have it in the Newsbreak app, because China's pissed, right? That's not it. China's pissed, and they're threatening, attack, right? As you see right here, again, in the Newsbreak app, it says, we need to attack with torpedoes, right? Sink a couple of American boats. Russian lawmaker calls for military response after U.S. seizes oil tanker. And, Russia ultimately sent a submarine to basically guide or to protect that oil tanker. And yet it was still, taken, right? So showing you that, America really just doesn't give a shit, It says, in a bold statement amid escalation tensions, Alexei Zhuravlev, the first deputy head of the State Duma Committee on Defense, has called for a direct military response to the United States' recent actions involving the seizure of an oil tanker, right? So they're threatening going to war. They're saying, we should go to war, right, with America, right? America and Russia directly going to war. That's a huge step, or a huge step in prophecy, right? Because we understand, right, according to the scriptures, right, Russia is going to be the main country, right, to ultimately shoot those nuclear missiles, on America, as well as Russia's allies, right? Let's go to this real quick, and we'll come back to this article. Spirit kind of hit on it. This is Ezekiel, the 38th chapter. And again, this is right talking about, Russia, right? It speaks about the land of Magog, but we understand that, the Russians ultimately, which the Edomites, right, which we call today Russians, right, they ultimately possess that land. So in reality, this is applying to the Edomites over there, right? This is Ezekiel 38 verse 4. It says, and I will turn thee back, right, and put hooks into thy jaws, and will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords, right, which we know the modern day sword is the gun, right, as well as there's different variations, right? You got tankers, you got jets, you got, which is all part of that, right? all part of that sword, right? The Esau Edom, right, is, was prophesied right back in Genesis 27 chapter, right, to live by, right, as part of his blessing, but it says, I will turn thee back, which means the Lord is ultimately going to be putting them, back into that Cold War, type mindset, right, within the Russians, with, within, like Vladimir Putin and whatnot, which we're seeing, what is his name? Glenn Beck, right? He ultimately made, a statement. I seen in a clip that, he said that we're in a Cold War, right? The second Cold War, and that he hopes it won't turn into a hot war, which, hey, we have the opposite sentiment, right? We hope it does turn into a hot war. We want World War III to, to pop off, right? We want all this tension and whatnot to escalate or continue to escalate, which again, the Lord Yahweh Shemel Shai is doing, right? He's escalating these tensions between, America and Israel, right? Who are partners, right? They've been ultimately, going and tag teaming, all these different skirmishes and problems that you see arising, right? It starts with America and Israel, as the scriptures say in Jeremiah, was that 15:45, right? That the least of the flock shall draw them out, right? And we're seeing it, right? America and Russia, which America is now being headed, right? It's been openly admitted, right, that Trump is a JOO, one of the small hats, man, so hey, we're seeing the small hats, right, drawing out the, this World War III, but nonetheless, right, again, right, the Lord is turning back, Russia and Vladimir Putin and whatnot into that back into that, the Cold War mentality where they're ready to go, they're ready to shoot. And we're seeing that, right? It says Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Again, it's just naming some of a few allies of, Russia, which one of them is what? Iran. I also seen in another video that this whole situation with, America taking, Venezuela, it's all for being able to go to war with Iran and not be affected when it comes to oil, right? That they'll have the oil reserves, they'll have the oil and stuff like that. So when they go to war with Iran, they won't be affected when Iran ultimately shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, and doesn't deliver any oil. So steps are being seen right through the spirit. World War III is about to pop off, man, really at any time. Let's go back to this article. Right, it says the comments were made in reference to the situation surrounding the tanker, and it's talking about, again, wanting to, shoot and drown, some American boats, right? It says the comments were made in reference to the situation surrounding the tanker named Mariner. It says, which was reportedly seized by the U.S. Coast Guard. Zurovlev's remarks highlight growing frustration following what he described as a U.S. special operation in Venezuela, which he believes has emboldened American forces. We think to attack with torpedoes, or it's like we need to attack with torpedoes, sink a couple of American boats, Zurovlev declared. He emphasized the need for a firm retaliation, stating the U.S. needs to be given a military response to the situation around the Mariner. The U.S., which is in a kind of euphoria of impunity after the special operation in Venezuela, can only be stopped now with such a slap in the face, so they're ready to go to war, and this is the man that ultimately made, the statement. He's ready to go to war, right? Russia is ready to go to war against America, which, call law Yahweh Shemiel Shah, because this is beautiful, man, right? It's a beautiful time to be, in this truth, beautiful time to be, seeing prophecy, right? Because again, it's unfolding, right? And really to make matters worse, there was just another Russian tanker, right, that ultimately got destroyed, right? It says Russian Shadow Fleet oil tanker hit by drone in Black Sea with thick smoke filling air, right? It says an oil tanker that is believed to be a part of Russian Shadow's fleet was reportedly hit by a suspected Ukrainian drone attack in the Black Sea, right? Which, again, right, going back to the small hats, right? We know that Vladimir Zelensky, right, he goes back to the small hats. So you're seeing a pattern here, right? All the small hats are the ones that are causing the wars, right? Which again is prophecy, right? Jeremiah 50 and 45. Look it up, right? It says, the oil tanker Elbus was seen with thick black smoke coming from its deck as it sailed nearly 30 miles off the coast of Turkey. The tanker, which flies the flag of Palau, an island nation, a part of the Micronesian region, issued distress signals before it abruptly changed course and headed towards Turkey. According to open source intelligence and maritime tracking accounts, it is reportedly registered to a Hong Kong company, right? It says the Ukrainian military has yet to comment on the alleged attack. The ship was previously named Euroleader until last year, was reportedly on its way to the Russian port of Novorossiysk, likely to load crude oil. So there you go, right? They towed it. It has not been sanctioned by the West. You know, and that was ultimately the point. And that's the ship right there. Right? And it was destroyed, right, by Ukraine, which we know Ukraine ultimately, you know, has been operating right under the, you know, the help and the leadership of the, you know, of the US, you know. So this is just a whole, basically a pile of tensions and bullshit that's, again, Lord will is going to, basically spill over, and we hope and we pray this continues to escalate, man, because World War III is going to be the war that ends all wars, and again, this is just a, quick update through the spirit, man, what's going on, with, between America and Russia. This is Joel 3 and 9. It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. And war is being prepared, right? The Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is having, America, and as we see, right, Ukraine, basically making moves that are, going to stir up, Russia, right, even more, right? They're going to stir up the bear, man, and it's gonna, it's going to call for, direct intervention, by Russia, whether it be, to protect, as we read in Ezekiel 38th chapter, right? Russia is to be a guard unto these nations, whether it be, to be a guard unto these nations, right? Which we know that's going to happen at some point, or it might be, a direct small skirmish between the two nations, right? Russia and America, right? We don't necessarily know how this is, going to play out, right? But we do know that the overall goal is Russia is going to be the main player in the destruction of America, and that at some point, right, Russia is going to step in, and stop America's bullying, right? That it's been, doing to these smaller nations such as Venezuela, right? Iran, right? There's talks that America and Israel are going to be coming at Iran again, right? So we'll just have to watch and see, what is ultimately going to play out, because we're in, hey man, so much happening right now, man. 2026 starting off way better, right? According to prophecy, way better than 2025. And 2025 was a hell of a year, But I'll read this again. This is Joel 3 and 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Right? And again, you got a lot of these smaller nations, especially even like North Korea. North Korea is speaking on, the issue, of America coming at, and snatching up Maduro. Right? And then now you got Colombia. Right? Colombia is sitting there saying, no, you want to sit here and come at us. It will, there's going to be a fight, And I'm just putting it in my own words. But, verse 11, it says, assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. That cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and again, right, the Lord is stirring up the minds, of these leaders of these different nations, man, and soon, again, very, very, very soon, right, World War III is going to pop off, we're here, man, we're here, but, I mean, that's all, as a matter of fact, I'll grab this last one, oldie but goodie, right? This is Revelations 11 and 14. It says, the second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And it's coming quickly, man. You know, but with that, Lord wills, edifying, Lord will, straight to the point, I want to give all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, or Chakwadash, double honor to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.